It's hard finding a game no one's already talked about. It's even harder to find one that's good. That's why it's great finding hidden gems like Soldiers of Anarchy, an awesome combination of XCOM, Fallout and Wasteland which results in a pretty unique RTS. To be fair, it does kind of suck unpatched, but more on that later. As the game begins, it's been about a decade since a deadly biological virus was unleashed upon the world. Labelled SGDS, the disease quickly decimated humanity. Early into the crisis, a small research and military team took cover inside a bunker in Russia and managed to hold out for the next 10 years. You take control of this small but well-trained band of troopers as they realise the world has drastically changed and not necessarily for the better. The civilization that remains is continually harassed by violent gangs, and while the disease has gone, the cause is still a mystery. It's down to you to coordinate your team through the wasteland in search of an explanation on what the hell happened years ago. However, it's the game's theming that keeps it interesting. It has a really cool yet oppressive atmosphere, really capturing the barrenness and giving a great deal of immersion to the world that reminds me a lot of the Fallout and Stalker games. Unfortunately, SOA kind of squanders its themes with some god-awful voice acting. I mean, this is the stuff of nightmares. It doesn't even fit the setting. I'm in Russia, yet everyone talks in a crappy American accent with cringe-worthy dialogue.
Well, I guess to the old military base in the west. They set up camp there. They come at least twice a day. Those pigs! I'd give anything to be able to...
The story itself starts off as a gritty investigation on what the world's become, then it just switches gears in the later half by ripping off Fallout plot point for plot point. Hell, the two main factions are basically the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave in every sense. So yeah, the story's not very good, but the gameplay is an interesting mix of dynamic base building, resource management, and squad-based strategy. The tactics involving your troops have a surprisingly large amount of depth that thankfully isn't too overwhelming. The beginning of each level has you choose the team members you want to bring into the mission, with the total being 9. Early on, you have very little in the way of manpower, but by exploring and completing objectives, you'll gain more members. Your Soldiers of Anarchy will gain access to different skills that can significantly affect your team's efficiency and will determine their equipment and playstyle. The guys with the explosive skill are going to be the ones with the RPGs and grenades, while the sharpshooters are going to have your sniper rifle and maybe crossbow. I like this a lot. It really encourages you to maintain your squad mates, as death is permanent, though you can save and load whenever. It's not particularly long before you realise you're running a tight shift in terms of supplies. Forget truckloads of firearms and ammunition and waves of tanks and jeeps. What you see is what you get. The only real way to stock up on supplies like explosives, ammunition, medicine, and weaponry is by scavenging off your fallen foes or exploring the environment for loot crates. A pile of landmines on the road can be collected for future use, while ammunition from a burnout car turret can be used for your own machine guns. The game is very stringy on stuff like rockets, the only weapon worth a damn against armoured vehicles, and since your troops have a pretty limited inventory, you're going to often decide what's worth keeping and what's worth dropping. Now, vehicles can also be deployed along with your troops, and there's a very large selection of different tanks, cars, trucks, helicopters, and even jets. However, you'll barely get to use the more interesting equipment, and anything unarmoured is basically rubbish before long when you're fighting tanks that can wreck a Humvee with a single shell. What this makes you do is explore the environments thoroughly for new toys, while also protecting and maintaining valuable items. It's a great feeling discovering an armoured personnel character that wastes enemy troops and cars. But it's also a miserable feeling seeing your prized tank getting wrecked in a fight. Besides that, you can also collect disabled vehicles which work as good scrap items for trading and can be repaired if they're worth it. You're outgunned and outmanned by much better prepared opposition in nearly every level. Direct attacks are nearly always suicidal. Instead, there's a big focus on setting clever traps and moving your troops around strategically. Though it is much simpler rushing to an enemy encampment, you're either going to get wasted by the eventual reinforcements or win a Pyrrhic victory. You're better off setting up some landmines or RPGs on a hill than luring the enemies out. While you can move your squad mates around individually, alone they're basically worthless, so separating them into small, purposeful squads is pretty much essential when using infantry. You'll also want to be aware of what stance they're in when moving near the enemy. Alerting them can effectively spell your squad's doom in some situations. Easily, the best moments come about when you successfully guide two squads into position, target the most dangerous enemy, and do a simultaneous takedown. No bullshit cinematic, just pure RTS satisfaction. Silence is extremely important when setting up your stratagems. But they thought, hey, let's make you only have one silenced weapon that's hard to find and harder to obtain ammunition. Often you'll just exploit the dumb AI that refuses to turn around while you take aim. Unfortunately, your troops in combat, especially on their own, is pretty bad. They lack any concept with who to target and what to fire with. They do stupid shit like firing a highly valuable and rare rocket at a fucking grunt to only then spray pellets at a goddamn APC. You really have to take control of who's shooting who, but even then it's annoying since it's easy to accidentally give a move order when you want to attack an enemy, basically screwing you over immediately. In general, they're pretty fiddly and kind of a pain in more complex operations, and tedious as all hell when exchanging items, but you gotta make do. Vehicular controls are pretty straightforward. You do get different weapon systems depending on vehicle, most being with tanks, so choosing the right ammo type when dealing with a problem is very important. There are some great moments in the game where you successfully coordinate your infantry and mobile units in a battle and come out on top unscathed. The mission objectives themselves are highly varied and robust in design. Early on, you'll deal with rescuing civilians from slavers, to then pick sides in a citywide battle, later on going cross-country, fighting every kind of whack job for the scumbag. You'll even protect a nuclear power plant from going critical. Combine those goals with destructible environments and you have a lot of fun. There's a few levels that have a very open world approach that's really cool and uses the large maps to great use. However, some of the missions seem pretty unfair. After scraping through a brutal firefight, the game expects you to take on a well-defended military base without a quarrel. So you really have to knuckle down and think out an effective plan with your meager equipment, since if you do poorly in one level, it's only going to get harder in the next. You spend your time between missions at your home base, where you resupply and get briefed on the next mission. You want to stock up on necessary items for your troops and vehicles, and use the leftovers for trade with merchants called Seekers. Leftover weapons and vehicles can be sold for more worthwhile stuff. SOA's trade system is really cool. If you push too hard for a deal, they'll have less stuff for sale later on, and vice versa if you give them a great bargain. Now, while the base can't be upgraded in the traditional sense, the more manpower you have, the more stuff you can do, like reinforcing vehicle armor or boosting your troops' health. The base itself lacks a lot of the clutter that often bogs down similar games. All your stuff is well organized and categorized, which is a good thing. I really love Soldiers of Anarchy's theme and setting for the world. It's not a far-flung future like in Fallout with laser guns and aliens. It's set in a post-Cold War Russia where you use old rusting tanks and battered firearms from another age. Your most advanced stuff are helicopters that were used in Afghanistan. However, Soldiers of Anarchy is by no means a perfect game. For starters, it's fucking awful unpatched! The main problem when it came out was how bad the pathfinding could be. When you moved a vehicle, it would just zigzag the fuck out of the terrain, or drive around in circles or get bogged down by a goddamn rock. Not only that, but your orders are delayed. What I mean by this is that there is a length of time when you give an order in which the game calculates the best route to take. Unpatched, it can take more than 5 seconds until a unit follows your instructions, regardless how basic a command. Need to move into cover? Delayed. Want to attack? Delayed. This becomes increasingly annoying the more you play. But it's not just that, but with vehicles like tanks that have different types of ammo for different situations, without the patch, you can't choose what they fire. So if you want to kill some infantry using a light machine gun, the AI will instead shoot everything at them. Rare and expensive tank shells that are only thing effective against heavy armor are wasted on mundane shit which you have no control over, and vice fucking versa when dealing with said heavy armor. Luckily, the patch fixes most of these control annoyances. The pathfinding is faster and more reliable, and you can control what weapon system you use. But it's still a pain when some jackass runs up to your tank and throws a grenade while your guys do jack shit. Another annoying quirk is that people inside the vehicles take damage when the vehicle itself is damaged. This is really stupid and really frustrating, since you can have a perfectly stable vehicle lose its occupants after a fight, and there is no way of knowing besides routinely checking them. But I think my main problem with SOA is how fucking hard and crappy it gets in the last third. See, the game expects you to salvage vehicles you fight for later use. However, it's incredibly difficult to properly disable them without destroying them. There's no way to target a specific part of a vehicle, like the wheels or the engine. You just fire until you hopefully kill the crew inside without any prompts or techniques. It's a complete roll of the dice in terms of success. So while the opposition continually gains better equipment, you're struggling to protect your vehicles from being wiped out or running out of ammo, made harder for lack of trade goods. But a lot of these more irritating problems only arise in the last third of the game. By then, the developers seemingly just forgot balancing or consistency because it's much easier to screw over the player with a crappy finale. However, there are 2 choices you'll make that change a few missions and the ending, but the general length stays the same. Overall, Soldiers of Anarchy is a flawed, interesting, and often satisfying and annoying strategy game that's basically been forgotten, which is a real shame, since it has a lot of great ideas and ambition that unfortunately doesn't come to a complete fruition, especially in the last third of the game. If you want to play it, just don't forget patching it.